there's a lot of cool myths around Superstition Mountains. That's why they're called the Superstition Mountains. That there's buried treasure there. And I think it's really fun to ask members, what's the story behind Superstition Mountains? Because you'll get a different story every time. And I think that's really fun to do, and just to kind of ask around. It's kind of one of the new things. Lots of still Indian reservation there that we'd sometimes drive through in order to get to Scottsdale for our mission meetings and stuff. So that's kind of neat. A lot of rich Navajo and Pima. So we were down by the Pima Reservation, but a lot of Native American history that's really interesting to learn about. We would go to the library on the Pima Reservation for P-Days to email. And while we were there, they would always be playing like traditional Native American music, and sometimes live performing. Just old people from the community would kind of get together in the library and just play on their wind instruments or drums or whatever. And that was really cool to listen to and kind of be involved in that. It's hot, and I would used to joke around with people that there are only two seasons in Arizona: summer and really hot summer. And during the really hot summer, you'll also get monsoons, which can be a lot of wind, a lot of water in a really quick amount of time. Also, there's dust storms. Several times we would be out on bikes and we'd get caught in a dust storm. And we'd always carry bandanas with us and just packed in our helmets for dust storms, and to cover our faces when we would be riding through them. Also, something I recommend is actually sunglasses if you're out biking, because the hot air as you're biking will almost start to burn your eyes. It's like riding, if you're riding even 10 miles an hour in an oven. It gets hot, and it's very dry. That was a kind of a big problem with me being from Illinois. I wasn't used to the dry climate. I used a lot of lotion and whatever I could to keep my hands from falling apart. But that's only maybe a third of the year. The other 2/3 of the year is gorgeous. Absolutely wonderful. Best season, just you don't have to worry about anything. It's just nice, stays at like 70, 80 degrees, dry, wonderful weather. And because of that, we get a lot of what we call winter visitors or snowbirds. And they come down during that season, and they're from Canada, lots from Canada, Montana, the Dakotas, even Utah, that come down and to have these winter homes here in down in Arizona. But it's kind of funny because they're notorious for being bad drivers. And so during that season, we would always get this make sure you're being safe on the roads, and you'd see tons of different license plates, Canada and Montana, whatever alike, and you'd see all and just bad drivers. That's kind of the stereotype that goes with snowbirds. One young man commented, he said, in most places when you see snow, you think about Christmas. Here, when you see all the different license plates, that's when Christmas is coming, because that's when all the winter visitors come down. So that's kind of a unique thing about Arizona, is with all the snowbirds. You get a lot of Mexican influence and a lot of Native American influence. So I had a lot of Indian fry bread, and I've actually fell in love with Indian fry bread. I love making it. It's delicious. I had that so many times. I call them Navajo tacos, is kind of a common word for it. It's just fry bread with meat and beans and anything you'd put in a regular taco. Kind of a blend between the Native American and the Mexican influences that are there. A lot of Mexican food, a lot of enchiladas and tacos. And so if you're in Arizona and you don't like Mexican food, learn to like Mexican food, because you'll get good Mexican food. I'll never forget our branch mission leader. He is Mexican, and his mother is really, really Mexican. And English is like her fourth language. It's like Spanish, sign language, or American Sign Language, Mexican Sign Language, English kind of thing. Like English is like her fourth language, and she cooks so good. She's every time we'd go over, we'd have these tacos that are just dynamite. So that was the coolest thing to look forward to, is really good quality Mexican food. Other than that, there's some great restaurants if you want to try that. I liked going to. I'm Italian, so I love Italian food, and there's a restaurant called Oregano's, and they're really good. Their food is okay, but the dessert, must recommend the pizza cookie, or the pizookie that they called it. It's probably the best thing ever. And if it's your birthday, they'll give it to you for free. It's 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 probably more calories than you need in a month, but it is delicious. And it's like a kind of half-baked cookie with ice cream and chocolate chips and whipped cream and all the works. And it's probably the best thing, and you should try it if you go down to that area. Yeah, other than that, lots of great Mexican restaurants as well. Because it is a farm area, we got a lot of fresh food, a lot of homegrown food, and I will never forget one. For them, when they butcher a cow, hamburger is the same price as steak. I mean, because it's just butchering the cow, and so they have a lot of steak because that's obviously better for it's economical. It's better for what you're paying for. And I remember this one member that fed us filet mignon with a cow, and the cow that they personally raised and had butchered, and also wrapped in bacon from a pig that they personally raised and butchered, and the whole meal was like homegrown, fresh, and it was the most delicious piece of meat I think I've ever eaten, and it was spoiled me, definitely. So that was really cool. Another area that's a little different from Mesa, but it is part of Mesa, they call Lehigh, and it's kind of in the North Mesa area, and it's had this historical setting. It's where the Saints first settled when they came down to the valley, and Mesa's up on a mesa. That's hence why it's called Mesa. But kind of down, you have Lehigh, and there's a rigorous canal system that the Native Americans had put there, and the Saints were able to use. And it's a farm, and in the middle of the city, there's horses, and I live there, and we had dozens of horses in our backyard, and pigs, and lots of farm animals everywhere. The members would be so gracious and give us fresh farm eggs every week, and we'd get farm grown pork and all the things that we need. And it was really, really cool just to be in this like farm, but we could walk to a Walmart. Like it was just kind of this cool little secret of Mesa in Lehigh. An area that used to be our mission is actually Snowflake, Arizona, and it was founded by the snows and the flakes. And they actually called the town Snowflake, and people don't believe that it's true, but it is. That's actually why the town is called Snowflake. So the many flakes and snows in Arizona, you'll get that last name a lot. So that's kind of cool. And a lot of the cities around were settled by LDS and the Saints, as they were asked by Brigham Young to go down and settle Arizona. And you can tell by the streets. They're straight, and they're put out in a really wonderful grid pattern, and it's wonderful to drive there. The highway system's great. The streets are just wonderful, thanks to the Saints. And the area I was in Lehigh, it's kind of old historic part. That area where they put the first church building, it's still there, and there's a church building. I think it's a new church building since, but that's the area where it was. And there's a historical museum right across the street. I actually lived right next door to it, and it had some cool artifacts from the Saints that came down and the things they did. One of the kind of cool stories they talk about is the honeymoon trail that goes up from Mesa to St. George, because before they had a temple there, they would go all the way up to St. George to get married, and then it would be the honeymoon trail all the way back down to Mesa. And so that's kind of a famous way to go from Mesa to St. George. When I was there, it was the centennial for Arizona being a state, and the Mormon Tabernacle Choir came down and did a special concert, and it was kind of a big celebration, and lots of people were involved, and it was kind of a really cool celebration. A lot of Arizona pride going on. Like I mentioned, the temple and the visitor center are kind of central. And the really cool thing about Arizona is the number of temples. We're building and building and building. So while I was there, they dedicated the Gila Valley Temple, and they announced the Gilbert, Phoenix, and Tucson temples. So 3 more temples in there. And then there's also the Snowflake Temple in my mission, as well as the Mesa Temple. So there's a lot of great temples, and they're beautiful, all of them. They have the pageant, the Easter pageant every year, which is the story of Christ, and and it's pretty remarkable it's such a huge production, and that draws in lots and lots of people. I mean, there's people standing on the streets to watch it. I mean, every day, every night of the show, and it's incredible. That's probably one of the neatest things about the history there is this. I think it's the longest longest running Easter pageant in the world. So that's kind of a cool thing to say. It was kind of weird to have, when I got transferred, I had an area size of, I don't know, maybe a couple square miles. Like, that was the size of my area in Mesa. It wasn't very big, very dense. I was covering like 3 wards, but it was like a few square miles, to an area that was, I couldn't even tell you how big it was. It was just huge, from Scottsdale to Surprise, Anthem to I don't know. Sometimes we'd go down to, I'm blanking on that city name. Whew. Anyways, south. I can't remember the name right now. But the area was so huge, and it was kind of overwhelming at first. I went from biking to driving 2,000 miles or more a month. It was a big change in that way. Being put in now Phoenix, which is a big city. We were in an apartment in the middle of the city, which was kind of different. And then to be teaching a whole another group of people, working with the deaf population was very different. They have very different attitudes and perspectives as the people I were working with before. And it wasn't just everyone you meet will be in your area kind of thing. It was really hard to find these choice individuals for us that we could go teach in ASL. It was very hard. We had to really depend on the members to help us and to assist us into finding. And that was probably the hardest thing to adjust to, is the finding was so much harder. But the people are wonderful, and they love the missionaries. And I was in that branch for a year, and I just love everyone there, and built great relationships with them. And that was probably one of the neatest things, is to be able to be involved in that. We worked so hard when I got there, they split the area. So we had 2 ASL areas, but still one branch. And there was an east and the west, and I did 6 months in the west and 6 months in the east. So I kind of got a good feel of both. And we worked so hard to get that branch to split. We wanted it so bad, and we worked and worked, and we had lots of success. And it was a lot because the members were finding for us and helping us find, and helping us teach as well. We had a ward missionary that was on the ball and was always getting people to our appointments and helping us at church. And then about, I would say 6-7 months after I went home, they finally split the branch, and so now it's 2 branches. There's a Mesa and a Phoenix, and so that's really exciting for anyone going there. Learning the language was tough, going from English to a whole new language where my companion was deaf, and we couldn't communicate in a common language. I needed to learn sign language in order to effectively communicate with him and all my investigators and members. And that was hard, but it was a quick learning curve, being kind of forced in to only one way of communication. And probably one of my greatest tips I give to all the ASL missionaries I meet, people going to learn the language, is to carry a little notebook with you. And every time you don't know a word, ask your companion, hey, what's the sign for this? Or ask a member, whoever will know, what's the sign for this? And then write down the word. And then every night, review your list that you made that day to make sure you know the words. In every language study, go over the whole book to make sure you remember every single word. And so every time, and within a few weeks, you'll be learning. I learned like 100 words a day and more those first few days, and just kept going more and more and more until finally I felt fluent in that language. Story about the gift of tongues that is just incredible. We were district leaders when I was in sign language, with the district leader over with us, and I was voice interpreting everything that was going on. And that can be really taxing on the brain, especially doing it all day. Most interpreters only go 15 minutes at a time, and I was interpreting all day for my district leader, and then also signing and everything. And it was at the end of the day, our last lesson, and we were preparing to extend a baptismal invitation to someone. And And we had gotten ready for it, and we were at this lesson, and we extended it, and the spirit was so strong in that room. And I had been interpreting the whole time, and it was just amazing how whenever we weren't in a lesson, I could barely say anything. My brain was just turned off. But as soon as we got in a lesson, I was able to be fully active and interpret. But kind of the neatest thing is I don't really know Spanish. And this was a Hispanic family, and she started talking to her children in Spanish, and I was speaking English from what she was saying, and she was like, "Wait, I thought you didn't know Spanish." I was like, "I don't know Spanish," and she would speak Spanish, and I would say the English, and it was this surreal experience of being able to translate a language I didn't even know, and to me, if I almost had a glimpse of probably what Joseph Smith would have felt like translating the Golden Plates, because I just, in my mind, I saw the words in my own language of what she was saying, even though I didn't know how to translate it myself. And I know that was the gift of tongues, and it was the Spirit helping me translate for my district leader and my companion, not only sign language but Spanish. And I have not been able to do that since. And it was just that moment when it was needed, and I was able to do that. And gift of tongues. The ASL Book of Mormon, which is a set of 17 DVDs that someone and she signs the whole Book of Mormon. And it's really interesting, but I really appreciated it as a missionary, not only as a proselyting tool, but as a personal studying tool. There were passages of scripture in the Book of Mormon that I didn't quite understand, or I didn't understand the wording. It wasn't very clear to me, but I'd watch an ASL and it was so much clearer, because the way the language is, it's a very clear and very succinct language, and there isn't a lot of fluff. And sometimes in the scriptural writing, there's words that are kind of older and we don't understand as much. But I would watch the ASL and I'd be like, oh, wow, what a great insight that I just gained from that. I remember one time, just this sense of, because it's visual, and they were talking about, how Christ helps us to be freed from sin, and how the signer used this expression of being disconnected and being, removed from. And it was different from what the kind of different image that I got from the scripture, from the English, but it was still, the same spirit of it. But I was able to gain from the visualness of, oh, that's really what Christ does for us. And there's this almost like a chain being broken, and it's kind of the visual look of it. And I thought that was really helpful for me as a missionary, but also to use as a proselyte until the ASL Book of Mormon is kind of very, very helpful in that way. I think deaf culture is number one. You learn my companion that taught me ASL stressed it so much. You learn the culture before you learn the language. I think that applies to a lot of languages. If you know the culture before you get into learning the language, you'll learn the language so much more effectively. Communication in deaf culture isn't about grammar. It isn't about syntax and all these things. It's about culture. It's about, can you communicate effectively? Can you be clear with what you're trying to say? And for every deaf person, the way they sign is different, and no two people are going to sign the same. They all come from different backgrounds and different ways of signing, so it's going to be different. And so to say this is the right way to do it and this is the only way to do it, you're just not. I mean, that's just being arrogant, and you won't be able to communicate effectively. The deaf culture is a culture within the American culture. I mean, they're very tight knit, and they help each other a lot, and they assist one another. And there's different spectrums of where they're at. Some are very this is the way to be, and we're going to exclude ourselves from hearing people. But I think most, and generally, you would find that it's a very give and take. We're trying to be a part of everything, and have friends that are hearing, and not only deaf friends, and be involved in a unified culture. I think that's what most try to strive for. I think learning about how they can communicate and how they interact with one another is really important as well. It's a different language. And I can talk through glass kind of thing with sign language. Like, I can talk across the room without bothering anyone. And so there's parts that bleed over into the culture, and parts of that are really it's a very, because sign language is so open. Eavesdropping, for example, isn't really a thing. Like, you can just watch someone's conversation and then it's normal. It's not impolite to say. They're more open, which I think is great for missionary work. They're very blunt and bold. I remember, so the missionary, or the members, feed us really well on the mission, and they like to feed us a lot. And I gained a lot of weight on my mission because of that. And I remember one, I think it was 3 in one day, deaf members that said, "You're looking really fat, Elder. Like, you're, that shirt's not quite fitting quite right. It looks like you need a little less." And they'll just tell you straight up, and they won't beat around the bush. And I really love that about the deaf culture. There isn't this, you have to be smooth with your words and tactful. I mean, there's tact, but it's still very bold and direct. And I love that. And when you teach, you can teach with boldness. I feel like I feel I was a lot better as a bold teacher in sign language than I was in English. I care a lot about tact and how people perceive me, but it's not as important in communication in the deaf culture. And I really like that. If we noticed someone was not following their commitments, we would tell them, and we wouldn't say, "Oh, hey, I noticed this beer can laying around. What's that about?" Like you'd say in English, goes, "Hey, you're drinking. We talked to you about that, and maybe we can help you to stop and stuff like that." Or and they're honest with us in return. They'll flat out say, "Hey, we're not interested anymore," or things like that. Or they, I really appreciated that, and I think that's sort of something that's hard for people going into the deaf culture that aren't familiar with that to accept and to feel comfortable with. There's the Phoenix Deaf Expo every year, and that is a huge gathering from all around the state and sometimes all around the country of deaf people that get together and have this festival. And this, I actually was never able to go. When it was going on, I was in the east area and it was in the west, so I wasn't able to attend. But our companions over in the west were able to go, and they set up a booth for the missionaries, and with the help of the word mission leader. The branch mission leader, and they were able to give out copies of the Book of Mormon in ASL and in English and Spanish, and give out pass along cards and invite them to the Easter pageant, which we had ASL interpretation for the Easter pageant. And that's kind of a really, really great opportunity, just for anyone, especially people that want to get involved in deaf culture. I mean, it's huge. And when I was there was also the World Deaf Expo was happening in Vegas, and even though I was quite outside our area, that brings people all over the world, and it's amazing. We had a branch member from Russia, and she only spoke Russian Sign Language, and she was learning ASL, and so it's kind of interesting to be exposed to different sign languages. We got exposed to a lot of Mexican Sign Language as well. I even learned a few phrases and some common talk in Mexican Sign Language, but it's just kind of cool to see these different, deaf cultures, which are almost subsets of their own cultures, kind of get together and create a whole new world or even state deaf culture. One of the coolest things we were able to do as a zone was to climb Camelback Mountain. And we actually did mountain climbing several times on my mission, whether it's Superstitions or Camelback. And I know those are going to the Mesa Mission now. It's no longer in the mission. They've changed the boundaries, but there are more mountains now, more to the east. But Camelback Mountain was one of the coolest things that I had done. It's about, an hour and a half hike up, and just the best view. And you're right in the middle of a city, like the mountains in the middle of the city, and you can just see the city for as long as you can go. And it's one of the coolest sights. And we would go really early in the morning to try to catch the sunrise. And that was really neat. Actually, when we were up there, we met the point guard for the Mavericks, for the Dallas Mavericks. I can't remember, blanking on his name right now, but we met him, and that was really cool to kind of see a celebrity up there kind of climbing with us as missionaries. And probably one of the coolest things. So mountain climbing is definitely something that's fun to do on P days, and when you get time with your districts and zones, I think it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of opportunity to do that there. Scottsdale is also kind of a cool area. I remember once Some people joke around because Scottsdale, there's a lot of money there, and so there's a lot of really nice cars. And they have like a Maserati dealership there, which is kind of the coolest thing to see. There's a Lexus dealership next to it, and it looks cheap compared to all the cars that are in this Maserati Ferrari dealership. And there was like a Bentley on display and some really incredible cars. I remember going to the mall there in Scottsdale, and this member was like, hey, you know, the only reason everyone goes to the mall is just to see the cars that are in the parking lot. And I was kind of joking, like, yeah, that's the only reason we're going. But I pull in and I see to the right, like my dream car, Lamborghini Murcielago, just gorgeous, you know, all nicely, just recently waxed, I'm sure, just sitting there. And I was like, yeah, that's why we go to Scottsdale, to see these cars. So kind of a funny story. I didn't know how to ride a bike before mission. I remember my bishop telling me, you know, you're going to a very densely populated area, and you'll be in a bike. Like, that's just how it's gonna be. And so, you know, you should probably learn how to ride a bike. And I kind of put it off, and I got on a bike once or twice, but never successful before I left. And I get there, and I was really hoping I would be in a car area. I know my MTC companion, he was put in a car area, so I was like, oh, maybe I will be too. And I get into a member's truck with my trainer, and he's like, well, before we go to our apartment, we're going to first go pick up my bike from the bike shop. And I was like, oh, we're in a bike, because I didn't see a bike in the truck, so I was assuming that we maybe had a car or something. And he's like, no, well, yeah, we'll be biking every day. And it was kind of I wasn't too happy about it. And we get there, and there was a bike left over from the missionary before. He was going home, and so he left his bike there. And so luckily there was a bike for me to use. And I get on the bike, and I could barely pedal it. And we were going, and it happened to be monsoon season, which in Arizona, monsoons are lots of rain, lots of wind, and they just all come at once for about, I don't know, an hour to the max, and then they're gone. And it was a monsoon hit right as we were proselyting for the first time, and it knocked me off my bike. I could barely get back on. It put a huge hole in my pants, my suit pants. And I was just thinking to myself, wow, 2 years of this? Really? I'm no. And but the next day we were riding up a hill, and we were crossing a street, and I couldn't figure out how to stop my bike, and I ran straight into a light post and just wrecked my bike on the ground. Rocks. There's no grass in Arizona. There's just rocks. So I'm on top of rocks, and our ward mission leader saw me crash, and pulled off and grabbed my bike and took it to the shop for me. So that was really nice, and got it fixed. But after a while, I was able to learn and get through the monsoon season and being able to ride a bike and everything. And yeah. So I get this new companion, and we really are praying for a new investigator. And I realized that the week before transfers, we got this referral. It's from Mormon.org. And we tried contacting before, but he was never home. And we prayed, and we're like, we're going to get a new investigator today. And it's going to be John. This was the name of this referral. It's going to be him. And, you know, let's plan to go visit him first thing in the morning. And we'll get our new investigator. And we felt really strongly about it. And so we went straight over there right after our morning studies. And we went over there. And he wasn't home. It was like kind of depressing, because we're like, we're pretty sure this was going to happen. You know, we have a lot of, we felt a really strong confirmation that we would see him today. And so we continued through the rest of our plans and the rest of our day. And then we came home after dinner for some reason. Maybe just use the restroom or something. I don't quite remember. But as we knelt down to pray, as we left, I felt really strongly to go visit John again, even though that wasn't in our plans. I just said, we need to go visit John again. And we did, and he was home. And there on his doorstep, we taught the first lesson, and he was interested. And he was a little confused as to why we got the referral. That's a whole fun story in itself. Turns out his ex-wife was a member of the church and just kind of put his name in Mormon.org, I think out of spite or as a joke. But he was super receptive to the gospel. He was at a time in his life where he wanted to hear it. His daughter had just been baptized, and he wanted to know more. And his ex-wife would always say how she wanted a priesthood holder in her home, but he never understood what that meant. And so he was really excited to meet with us. Well, within moments, on the same street, my tire just goes out. just flat, like no air in it, just like that. And I was like, it's so weird. So we walked all the way home with our bikes, and I realized there was a nail about 3 or 4 inches in my tire that, looking back in the day, had probably been there all day. I remember hearing a clink, clink, clink the whole day, but it didn't go out until after we met John, and then my tire went out. I knew then that we were meant to meet him that moment. The next lesson we set a baptismal date, and he was baptized on that date right before transfers, and we both got transferred. We're the only 2 missionaries to teach him. We're the only 2, and we've all stayed in contact together. I was able to attend his wedding. He married a nice member of the church, and then they also got sealed in the temple later, a year after that. And that was probably one of the best experiences ever to be. I know this is where I needed to be. The Lord helped us by keeping my tire going. It's so simple, but as soon as he was done with me on the bike, no more air in that tire. So that was kind of a neat experience for me. So I was in Mesa for my first year. Actually, for the majority of my mission, I was in Mesa for a good probably 15, 16 months in my mission. And Mesa is the best because there are so many members, and there's church buildings everywhere, and the members love you. And probably one of the coolest things as a missionary is you can go into most places and they'll just take care of you. Like, members will show up and they'll pay for your meal, or they'll buy groceries for you, or things like that. And it was really helpful, especially at one time in my mission where we opened up a new apartment. Actually, twice in my mission, I opened up a new apartment, and we had nothing. And the mission didn't provide very much. And I think it's probably because the members can help us out so much. But we would go to the store, and these members say, hey, and I would just run into the right person, like, oh, hey, I was the housing coordinator for the Tempe mission. I know exactly what you others will need. I got connections. And within a week, we had everything we needed for that apartment. It was just, miracles like that. And members are everywhere. And so that was one of the great blessings of serving in Mesa. Like, we had so much help and support everywhere we went. Riding your bikes in Mesa, you will usually get a lot of honking, usually good. And a lot of thumbs up, and yeah, go missionaries. So that was always uplifting when you're riding your bike in the heat. People recognize that, and they feel bad for you. Everyone knows who the missionaries are in Mesa, because there's so much LDS church there. And so, it's hot. Everyone gives you water, whether, they like you or not. They still give you water. They're not that heartless usually. But I'd say one of the highlights to being in Mesa is the visitor center. So we have a temple, and we have a visitor center there in Mesa, and that is amazing. I took so many investigators to the visitor center where they can watch movies and be in air conditioning, and be able to enjoy the murals and the Christus statue and the different exhibits that they'll show. They show many art exhibits, and then in the Christmas time, there's nativities from all around the world that they show, and there's beautiful Christmas lights comparable to Salt Lake that they have over in the temple grounds, and concerts nightly. Easter time, they have a pageant, the Easter pageant. It's phenomenal. It's about the Easter story and Christ and his life and everything, and it brings so many Christian religions together to watch that there on the temple grounds, and that's a really special experience to be able to go to that. So I know when I first got my call to Arizona, I was a little bummed because I wanted to go to like Italy or someplace exotic. But I am so grateful for that call. I've built relationships with the people there in Arizona that I could not have built anywhere else. I was able to be there for some people that I just know that the Lord prepared me to be there for those people. There's nothing better than when you're teaching someone and they say, oh, I know that you are the person that needed to teach me this, or else I wouldn't have accepted this. And that happened so many times on my mission where I knew that that's where the Lord wanted me. And he had prepared me and to serve in the capacities that I was able to serve in. For example, before I was called to serve in the sign language area, I had a companion that was actually in the sign language area. And the one transfer he spent in English was with me. And he prepared me by teaching me some of the language and by preparing me for that area, not knowing that I would go there. But the Lord prepared me for all my assignments that I had on my mission. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. It is the best mission. I know everyone will say that, but you will have the best time because it is where the Lord wants you to be. And you're lucky that you are worthy and prepared to bless the lives of the wonderful people that are there in Arizona. They will love you. They do. They love missionaries, and they will love you. And as you love them and serve them with your heart, mind, and strength, you will be given this gift of appreciation and love that you've probably never experienced before. And I know that the Lord knows his children, and that he blesses their lives through us as missionaries. And he also blesses us as the missionaries through the members and the investigators that we meet. And I know that he is always mindful of us. And if we pray to him, he will guide us and strengthen us through our challenges and difficulties. Because it won't be easy. It'll be hot. You'll be dehydrated and you'll want to go home. But if you pray, he will strengthen you in capacities that you didn't even know that you could be strengthened through. And I leave that with my testimony that our Savior lives. He loves us. He knows us. He atoned for us. And that is the most important thing to remember. And I say that in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Well, I think I served in the best mission in the whole world. Mesa, Arizona is really, really hot weather, really hot and dry. But it was perfect for me because I'm not a fan of snow or cold weather at all. And that was a worry that I had, that I would get called to Russia or Alaska or someplace really cold. But Arizona was perfect. In my call letter, I was called to Mesa, Arizona Mission, but also given an assignment to serve in the Mesa, Arizona Temple Visitor Center. And that made my mission really unique. It's different than serving in Temple Square, where you are at the visitor center all the time, all hours of the day. In Mesa, we served in the visitor center every day from about 3 to 6 hours, and then the rest of the time we spent in our area. And I loved that. It was perfect because sometimes there wasn't as much work going on in our area, and so we could go to the visitor center and teach people there, teach them on Mormon.org chat, or teach them over the phone. And when we didn't have as many people to teach at the visitor center, we had our area and work going on there. The hardest thing for me personally about being on a mission was our responsibility to talk to everyone. So we didn't knock on doors in Mesa because there were so many members of the church that most of the doors would have been members. So we worked through member referrals and through referrals from the visitor center. But we would also talk to everyone that we saw on the streets, and it made me so nervous. Anytime we had to walk up to someone and introduce ourselves, I got nervous and many times didn't want to do it. So in the beginning I had really good companions who would make me do that. And then when I was a senior companion, I would just have to pray really hard, and there were people that I missed and times that I regret that I didn't stop and talk to everyone. And every time I did, even though I was nervous, we were always blessed, and people were usually pretty kind. Or even if they weren't interested, I felt better for talking to them and knowing that I tried and invited everyone to come into Christ. And now that I'm home for my mission, I miss that, and I still try to say hi to people that I pass in the street and smile at everyone, because everyone, whether I know them or not, they're my brother or sister, and they're a child of God. One of the biggest lessons that I learned on a mission was that miracles happen every day. And it's true in the scriptures, it says that God is a God of miracles. And they can be small, they can be big, it doesn't matter. He's constantly working to help his children and to help me, to help you, to help everyone. And one of those miracles I wanted to share was about a man named Harold. And we met Harold on a really bad day on my mission, so I think someone called and canceled a lesson, and it was our 10th lesson canceled that week or something, and I was so frustrated, and we happened to be at the visitor center, and we were about to leave to go to that lesson when it canceled. And another sister there noticed that I was kind of upset, and she said, "Sister Burton, this just means that something great is coming, a big miracle is coming, because it's been so hard recently." And so my companion and I tried to cheer up, and we left the visitor center on our bikes that day. And my companion said, "Let's go visit this member and ask about their neighbors." And as we were biking on the street of that member, I looked to my left and saw a man and a woman sitting outside. And it's scary for me to talk to everyone, but that day I felt like pulled to go talk to them, and I just stopped my bike and hopped off and walked over to them, and they were so funny and had us sit down and asked us who we were. And the man wasn't interested. He was the uncle of the woman outside. So we started teaching the woman for a few weeks, and then she moved. And she had had a baptism date and was so prepared, but moved away, and we lost contact with her. And we decided we would just go and try her uncle. Maybe we had met her to meet him, even though he hadn't been very interested. So we went back, and we're going to offer him a Book of Mormon and talk to him. And as soon as he opened the door, he asked us, "Where can I get a Book of Mormon?" And he told us that his niece had told him that everything she learned at our church was what he already believed. And so that day we started teaching Harold, and a couple of months later he was baptized a member of the church. And I remember that day when we met him, how hard it was, but Heavenly Father was preparing a miracle, and Harold was that miracle. And if we look every day, we can see God's hand in our life and see that He is watching out for us and that He knows what we need. And finally, just a little advice to you who have gotten home from your missions. You're going to figure it out. You're going to be fine and do great. I remember coming home, and a lot of people wanted me to be who I was before, or they want me to go watch movies with them that I decided weren't good for me anymore. And even my bishop would say, "Are you watching TV yet? What shows are you watching?" And I just didn't have a desire to do those things, and was feeling pressure from everyone just because they love you and they are excited to see you and to do things with you. So nothing wrong on their part, but I would just say be true to yourself and seek the Spirit. Your purpose is the same, and you can watch movies, you can do TV, that's fine, but do things that are uplifting, and that won't drive the Spirit away, because we all need the Spirit with us to be able to continue to see the Lord's hand and to be instruments in His hands to bless others.